Welcome to the Medical Ancillary Sales Podcast, your number one source for making money in the medical ancillary sector. Mike and Viv bring you the latest information from lab services, pharmacy, diagnostic testing, and so much more. The latest in ancillary services will be right around the corner. Welcoming the hosts of the Medical Ancillary Sales Podcast, here's Mike and Viv.
Hello and welcome to the Medical Ancillary Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Bird, and joined as always by Vivian Hudson. Happy Monday, Viv.
Thanks, Mike. Today we've got a special guest. This one's a little bit different from some of the other ones that we've had. This is someone who sells very lucrative equipment. So would you like to introduce our special guest, Mike?
Yes, today we have Sean Coffey on, and Sean has experience selling a variety of capital equipment. I know I've worked with Sean for going on the last 2 years, and I've always had a positive experience dealing with him and his company. And I was just talking to Sean recently about one of the devices that he sells, which is the VAT, vestibular balance testing device. It's been around for years, but it's flying off the shelves right now. So I thought this would be a perfect time to have Sean on. So Sean, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So first and foremost, Sean, not everybody listening to this podcast has experience with VAT. So can you give us a breakdown? What is the VAT ENG device? What does it do? Who does it test, etc.?
Well, the VAT ENG is a device that was developed 30 years ago out at USC, and it is a simple, easy vestibular testing device. And so it is used on all patients with dizziness and all seniors who have fallen. And the numbers are 1 out of every 3 seniors falls. So this is a simple, easy way to be able to test seniors for falls to help prevent that, as well as to fix patients with dizziness. Half of all seniors actually have a vestibular problem, but this is not balance testing. Balance only affects 9% of seniors. So the nice thing with this is it's very easy to test a patient, takes less than 15 minutes, and it is 90% fixable. So all we're really testing is their eye movement. We want to make sure when they're stepping over things, walking along, doing things, that their eyes are moving correctly, because if they're not, they tend to trip over things, and it's that little trip that leads to the fall progression.
So tell me about the revenue model. So I know that it costs a few $1,000s for this device, but how quickly can a doctor expect to get their money back if they decide to invest in this piece of equipment, and what do the reimbursements look like?
Okay, typically when a patient comes in, I'll use Medicare numbers. When a patient is identified at risk for falls, the initial test typically doesn't take even 15 minutes to do and is reimbursed approximately $200. We also provide the practice with vestibular exercises to give to the patients to take home to do. As I stated before, they're 90% effective, and that's according to the Mayo Clinic. If they go over those exercises with the patient and train the patient on how to do the exercise, and again, they're just eye exercises, it takes a couple of minutes to do, they get another $30. Then what they do is schedule the patient to come back in 4 weeks, in where they're going to get another $100 for a test. Just a portion of the test takes less than 5 minutes, plus they'll get an office visit. So roughly around $350 per patient. However, if you just use a number, I like using basic numbers. So if you have an internal medicine doctor seeing 25 patients a day who's 50% Medicare, he's seeing roughly 10 to 12 Medicare patients a day. So if we use a number of 10 Medicare patients in a day, on average, he sees 3 fallers. That doesn't even take into account patients with dizziness. So on those 3 fallers, if we only did the initial test, we would get $600 a day. And that's without therapy, that's without follow-ups, no nothing. It's $600 a day. The doctor's going to make $12,000 every month, and so you're talking about him recouping his money in a little over 3 months.
Now, Sean, you mentioned this device has been out for decades. I know we've had experience selling this in the past and have had good success, but why the sudden uptick in your opinion?
I believe a lot of it has to do with, I mean, first and foremost, doctors are always looking for new ways to generate revenue. This product's been out for a while, and so a lot of them know about it. However, with the push towards quality care and quality medicine, and also the push on fall prevention, especially in terms of annual wellness visits, where the two biggest things are risk of depression and risk of falls. So it's becoming more and more visible. So I'm talking to doctors all the time who are telling me, yeah, I mean, this particular Medicare Advantage program is requiring us to ask patients about falls. One of the PQRS measures is screen every senior for future fall risk, which is asking them one question: have you fallen in the last 12 months? So again, that identifies 1 out of every 3 seniors is going to have this test. So I just think that it's starting to come back around because now they're starting to realize they can fix this. So it's nice to be able to find out something that Medicare is hammering them on, which is fall prevention, and to be able to treat their patients and actually see results with it.
So what are some of the key objections that you see when you're talking to doctors about this particular piece of equipment, and how do you overcome them?
Not really seeing many objections. About the only objection I will run into occasionally is about the competition, which is a VNG, uses goggles. And so, for instance, I was just at the TexMed convention this weekend, and a doctor came up to me and was talking to me about this, who has a VNG, and he told me he never uses it. So he subsequently bought my machine there at the show, and we're installing him this week. But that's really the biggest there really aren't any objections to this. Maybe price might be an objection to somebody, but again, you show them based on the numbers. And we even have a questionnaire that a doctor can use to screen patients prior to making a decision and find out how many patients a day he does have so he can run his own ROI. So that's one of the best things that you can get a physician to do, is to hand out that questionnaire, because then you can walk in. If he's got 2 a day, you walk in and say, that's $8,000 a month. And that's without even any therapy or follow-up. So it's really... There aren't really too many objections. The main question I ask a doctor, if it's important for you to know that when your patient looks down to step over something, say step over the curb or something, that their eye is where it is supposed to be, then you buy the machine. So, and most of them think that it is important to know that information.
And Viv, go ahead, Viv.
So, I was just going to ask, so what is the cost of a fall? Because obviously if someone falls and hurts themselves, I mean, what's the cost of a fall to the healthcare community?
Well, I mean, typically, there's statistics out there. It used to be, and this was back years ago, it was costing around $20,000 for a fall. Obviously, that was about 15 years ago, so it's much closer to 40 to 50. But it's even greater than that in terms of just the patients themselves. And so one of the things I always tell a doctor, and the American Geriatric Society even says this, that the first fall may or may not be catastrophic physically. It's psychologically catastrophic to a patient. So the very first fall, when a patient falls, psychologically it damages them. So there are those components. If a patient breaks a hip, 1 out of 3 are going to be dead within a year. It is the leading cause of fractures. It's a leading cause of accidental death amongst seniors. There was even a recent study that came out that said that the incidence of injury and the seriousness of injury from falls is increasing. And they're not quite sure why it is. I think diet may play a role in it, because the bones are a little more brittle than they used to be years ago. So it's becoming a big focus right now.
Oh, I'm gonna shift our format a little bit and ask you a question here, Viv, because I know you have a lot of experience with this, and we've seen the fall prevention device get sold, packaged together with some other programs. What are the other ancillary programs that are good lead-ins or good things to package together with the VAT?
Well, I think you can't have a conversation about annual wellness and or chronic care management without talking about fall prevention. So they just tie in so nicely together. When you are doing an annual wellness visit with a patient, the question comes up, has the patient fallen in the last 12 months? And as Sean was saying earlier, that the risk for falls is quite high. So if you are looking at your Medicare population and you're doing several annual wellness visits a day, there's going to be somebody there that says, yes, I have had a fall in the last 12 months. And then that's the perfect segue then into having them tested for falls right then and right there. Well, actually, they probably have to come back as a follow-up visit. That would be right, wouldn't it, Sean?
No, not at all. No, not at all. Literally, you could put them in a room, do an office visit, and do this test immediately and collect both on the office visit and on the test. So about another $300 they could collect.
Plus the annual wellness visit, so that's like
Correct.
a $500 or $600 day right there.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So the annual wellness visit is one, and then with chronic care management, when they're getting those regular calls, they are the patient is going to be asked if they've had a fall since the last time the patient was spoken to, and again, that's going to detect those patients very quickly. And patients won't always tell their physicians face-to-face if they had a fall, because they might be embarrassed about it, because if they didn't hurt themselves, they might think, well, what does it matter? But any fall is a risk for falls. So definitely those two programs right there, it's hard not to talk about fall prevention when you're talking about those two programs.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with you, Viv. I mean, the annual wellness visit really looks at 9 different preventive things, and the 2 biggest ones, and you see it over and over everywhere that Medicare anybody publishes it, the 2 biggest: risk of depression, risk of falls.
Well, Sean, I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit, only because I know you can handle it. I don't know if you remember the first time I actually met you in person, Sean, but it was at a trade show in Orange County, and you were talking to me at the booth, and meanwhile, you were having 2 or 3 conversations with different doctors. So I've watched you do this before. I know you can handle it. But give me, I'm a doctor, I'm giving you 1 minute. I don't know anything about VAT. What's your pitch?
What I tell them is Medicare is hammering you for fall prevention. As you know, 1 out of every 3 seniors falls. Once they fall, 75% fall repeatedly. And the problem is not a balance issue. The problem is that half of them have a vestibular issue. 85% of fallers have a vestibular issue. And again, it is not balance. It is their eye movement. This machine can detect that for you, and you can actually treat it. Mayo Clinic says it's 90% effective in fixing it, and then do a follow-up to show that you fixed it. And by the way, you'll make an additional anywhere from $200 to $350 depending on how much you do on the patient.
Boy, that was awesome. I'm going to write that one down.
That's kind of the bottom line.
Well, perfect. Sean, I want to thank you for getting on today's podcast. And if anyone would like to reach Sean, or you want to reach the podcast, you can email us at ancillarypodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for getting on, Sean.
Appreciate y'all's time. Thanks.